Hi there, I'm Stephen Leptite, editor of The Drum, and I'm here today to go over a topic that we've been writing about for years and the advertising industry has really struggled to overcome, and that is brand safety. I'm talking about how that is affecting or evolving right now when it comes to media and those working in that sector. So I'm lucky enough to be joined today by Tanzil Bukhari, Managing Director of EMEA for DoubleVerify, James Buckle, Head of Digital Services Global Business for PHD Worldwide, and Stacy Gratz, Global Media Director of Bacardi. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as we all work from our living rooms and our spare rooms and we have this conversation in different parts of the country, I'm curious what you've all seen to be the initial changes that have been experienced by, the media sector, but advertisers as the pandemic has taken hold in recent weeks. Tanzil, could I start with you on your initial views on that?
Sure. I think the biggest impact has been on everyday life. The challenges that we're all facing from working from home, even living with kids, and generally the focus around how not just our industry but all industries are struggling to engage with their consumers. That struggle has really had a knock-on effect to every part of brands and marketers and agencies and tech vendors working life. Budgets around advertising spend have been impacted, been reduced, given the engagement and the ability for those brands to sell their wares. Agencies, as those budgets have been reduced, the agencies are struggling to have enough work to keep their people busy. The impact of all of that on tech vendors like ourselves is exactly the same, right? We're all beholden to when those budgets are, actively flowing through the ecosystem. The impact to publishers is also, well documented. A lot of the news publishers are struggling right now because, obviously there's a challenge around the type of content that's being shown. And I think a lot of this comes down to, should I say, perceptions of people in the industry and a lot of misconceptions that the industry has around brand safety and the concept of blocking, especially now that we have a global pandemic where, a significant portion of the content available is COVID related. So I think, the impact has been significant for everybody, especially those on the call here, but beyond as well. And I think what we're seeing is steps taken. Ultimately, from our perspective, where as a technology vendor, we are still engaging with our brands, and agency clients. We're spending a lot of time doing additional education at the moment. People have time on their hands, so we want to focus on making sure people continue to learn and engage. Innovation continues to happen. Whilst we're not working as much with the volume of campaigns, it gives us an opportunity to really focus on the things that are important in the brand safety world. And I'm sure, Stacy and James are able to talk to their focuses for now, but I think it's a really interesting and unique situation. In my 20 years in this industry, I've never come across a situation quite like this.
You've picked up on a few things I'd like to come back to there, but Stacey, can I ask on what's been your perceptions of recent weeks? What has changed for you?
Well, from us, what's really been a big change is our operations. So not necessarily related to marketing, but we've looked at Bacardi, how we can start giving back to the community, especially the restaurant and bar community and the healthcare workers. So we've taken our distilleries and turned them into, we've started giving back to the local community by making hand sanitizer gel. And then we've also set up a fund for the partners in the restaurant and bartending communities. So that was the first week where we it was the whole company, everyone on board, like how can we give back in this time? And then we shifted to, okay, from a marketing perspective, what is our voice? What do we want to say right now? And what should we not say? And where should we just be quiet? And so we're listening. We have our insights team set up to just listen and identify what are those signals when it's the right time for us to enter into the market in a meaningful way from a marketing standpoint. But we're also seeing a big increase in e-com sales, which is something that has always obviously been a big focus for us as a company, but just recently now we've seen such an increase that we've shifted a lot of our focus to that as well, to make sure that we not only have stock in those areas, but we're available when people are searching for us.
And James, what has changed in your environment?
Yeah, I definitely echo a lot of the sentiments that both Tanzil and Stacy have mentioned. I think we've seen obviously similar impacts on a number of our clients' businesses. I think the overall theme that we're tending to see is just this overall uncertainty about what should we do and how should we do it. And I think it's along those lines that Stacy was touching on, is what is the right thing for our brands and our clients to do at this point to provide value to people throughout this crisis, and show what the steps they are taking to adapt to a global pandemic. But then also, how do we support and provide that strategy to help them understand how we come out of this crisis. So it's a really interesting communications challenge for us as an agency. For us as a global business, we work across global markets and global clients. So understanding how that is shifting as different markets are in different stages of their approach to this crisis, and how we have to adapt our strategies and figure out exactly what those signals are. What is the right time? What are the themes and insights we can generate from our partners and across the verticals that we work in, to really understand the right time and the right message to come out of this. So we're seeing a lot of impact, but also a lot of uncertainty at the moment in terms of how we should approach this. But we're learning more as we go through this process. So as more things come available, as we see and can collect more data and analyze that, we can have a much clearer understanding and feedback that back into the strategies. So we're getting kind of more confident about what we can and cannot do.
Yeah, Stacey, how much are you relying on your verification partners and agencies to guide you right now? Are you leaning on them more than ever?
More than ever, absolutely. And our partners have been just incredible. I mean, we have our agency partners. DV has been great. They've helped us understand that we don't need to block all COVID or coronavirus content. There is content that makes sense for us to be around, where people are doing activities at home. And so we would have taken a really strong approach of just blocking everything, but our partners have come to us and really helped us understand that isn't always the right thing to do, and helped us gain a better perspective of what's going on. So it's been, our media partners have been amazing as well, keeping us informed of what people are searching for, what consumer behaviors have changed. So I don't know what we would do without all of our partners. It's been a really positive experience in that sense, in terms of how we're working together.
And Tanzil, what is DoubleVerify being asked to do more and more for the companies that you're working with? How are verification providers having to adapt?
So in the same way that Stacey said, we're engaging with all our clients. I mean, it's a unique situation, and given the type of news available, where there's a lot of positive news and negative sentiment news, there's a need for brands, and generally the brands have had a not so much a knee-jerk reaction, but a reaction which has been to overprotect.
Yeah.
And the challenge with overprotection is it minimizes scale. So when you still want to engage with your consumers, but you have a very, very harsh, your reaction to news content or to other content that's available, you sort of end up minimizing the opportunity to engage with your consumers. So, I mean, for the last 4 weeks or so, 5 weeks, most of our time has been spent in engaging with our brands, engaging with our agency partners, in sort of crafting the right message, crafting the right strategies, and ensuring that we're helping brands protect against the challenges that they feel are relevant for their brand, and they differ by brand, and helping the agencies ensure that, I mean, the strategies that they've put in place to execute against their clients' goals are supported by companies like DV rather than hindered by us.
Yeah, so are there any common pieces of advice that you've been giving out in that respect to your client that you're finding you're having to repeat over and over in order for them to really maximize what they're doing?
You know, I think people get comfortable with things like brand safety. So, you mean, one topic that we've been discussing very recently, you know, even with the UK government, has been keyword blocking and keyword lists. And I mean, the general consensus and the way that most people operate with keyword lists is they continue to add to keyword lists. So, I mean, we had one client, for example, who was running keyword lists, and as they moved over to DV, we saw that they were still blocking the keyword Manchester. I mean, from 4 years ago, from when the Manchester bombings happened, right? So it's about making sure that we're working with our clients, reviewing their settings, reviewing their keywords, reviewing their categories, understanding the areas of their concerns. You know, we talk about brand suitability, and like I said, it varies by brand significantly. And so we do this in conjunction with our agency partners. And then we've spent a lot of time working with those agency partners and the brands to make those changes and continue to engage with consumers. It's been an interesting exercise. If for no other reason, it's been an opportunity to do some housekeeping for everybody.
That's interesting. James, what is the role then that agencies are currently playing within all of this, and what have you seen change for PHD?
Yeah, so actually, I don't think overall our role has actually changed too much. I think just the challenge has changed. You know, overall our role as an agency is to act as a trusted partner and advisor to our clients to help them navigate their marketing objectives. And the reality is, just within this crisis, those objectives have changed. So it has forced us to kind of pivot and figure how we, in an agile way, can address this landscape and address, you know, how those objectives have changed across vertical and across client as well. But I think what has been really an interesting challenge for us as an agency is how do we actually understand what is happening within consumer behaviors and trends within the media landscape to really truly be able to understand what the right strategy is. And I think that's overall driven by the fact that this is, you know, an unprecedented situation. It's also a completely different landscape to any other crises that we face. So the landscape in 2008 was obviously fundamentally different. So the consumer touch points and the interaction points have developed significantly. So that creates a new challenge. And for us as an agency, it's how we can work with our partners and our clients with the data that we have available to make decisions that drive the best outcomes for our clients in this climate as well. So overall, I don't think our role has changed. I think it's just how we're adapting to a very fluid environment and fluid situation, and try and make the right decisions as and when we need to.
Sure. So
and if I could just, sorry.
On you go, please, Stacy.
I was just going to add, I mean, one thing that it's really forced us to do on the brand side is rethink how we do planning and how nimble we are. I mean, we always talk about wanting to be more agile, more nimble. Well, this has forced that, and it's really forced us to rethink the way we plan. And our agency has been pushing us for years on this, and now's that because they have been thinking about this for so long and helping us evolve the way that we want to work. And now that this issue has been forced, it's been amazing to have our agency partners step in and really become a part of the planning cycle in a way they haven't maybe been before.
So as I said earlier on, brand safety is a topic that certainly has been an issue for a long time for advertisers. I'm curious about, though, how that is evolving and how sophisticated the issues become. Tanzil, would you be able to give us a bit of an idea as to what you've seen in terms of how that has evolved in recent months or years?
Sure. So, I think the notion of brand safety hasn't necessarily changed, right? So brands want to understand for themselves what is important to them and where they want, which mediums and environments they want to be participating in and where they want to be sort of not engaging in. And I think that premise hasn't changed. What has changed over the years is the technology that's available to you to be able to execute against that. We talked about keyword blocking and and things like whitelists and blacklists. These have been around since the start of the digital industry started, right? I can remember way back when we had networks and targeting and blocking was done based on whitelists and keywords. And the challenge that a lot of brands have is they're still very heavily focused on using these type of tools. Technologies, when we look at DV, for example, the innovation that we've had over the last 3 or 4 years, both through development and acquisition, has been how do we do things like understanding content better, understanding the context of the page, understanding based on either the title or the content on the page itself, how do we classify that content into a format that allows brands and agencies to better protect themselves. So I think over the years, the type of technology and the depth by which you're able to protect your brand has increased. It's no longer it's no longer about having very high level categories, 10 or 15 categories that were really bad that you should protect yourself against. DV offer over 78 categories. Whereby you can really get into very nuanced classifications of content, and what this allows is brands and agencies to really create a profile that's unique to them, and even unique to their campaigns. Right? We have some advertisers that have multiple lines of business that target different audiences, and therefore have different sensitivities. So. I think that depth and the ability for us to go as broad as possible across as many mediums. We've seen mobile, we're looking at CTV and audio and out of home. All of these environments have brand safety implications, and we're seeing solutions being provided against those. So there's been a lot of change.
And James, do you have a view on how this is going to evolve? Especially as a result of all that we're going through now? Is there going to be an evolution when it comes to brand safety solutions?
Yeah, I think Tanzil is completely right in terms of the tools that we can apply to make these decisions. I think we have been on that journey with a number of clients, and I think the industry overall has been. I think this is going to require us to have a different approach, considering the context of this situation. And the impact that is having on publishers and providers and technology partners, as well as was mentioned up front. I think that the challenge we have is how we apply those tools. I think the concept of brand safety has been a relatively blunt tool, which has led to some of the issues we've had with broad keyword blocking, broad site blocking. Whereas we actually think to move this forward, you have to think of this in a kind of macro and micro perspective. So where we as an agency have the kind of onus to our clients to make sure that we are minimizing the potential risk up front. So where are the macro filtering perspectives we can take in terms of inventory? How do we make sure before that inventory decision even gets to the auction, if we're talking about programmatic, that we minimize the risks there? So through supply path optimization, curation with our inventory partners, working with technology providers in the verification space to understand the impact of our buying and how we feed that in. And then using some of those more kind of specific tools that really allow us to get into the detail at a micro level, to look at keyword blocking, to look at more site optimizations, to look at different verification tools, whether that's machine learning or automated solutions as well, where we can then control a little bit more of that specificity in the context of an individual campaign. And I think that is hopefully helping to drive advertisers more to around understanding what is appropriate for my brand in the context of the campaign versus what is safe overall in the media landscape that we need to remove just by definition. And I think it's moving to understand that it doesn't need to be kind of a blunt tool that we apply, and there are varying degrees of safety that we can apply. Obviously understanding that you can't reduce the risk in total, and there is always going to be instances as new platforms emerge, as new ways of interacting with things, that we are going to have to try and solve for in the future. And I think it's also having a bit more of a collaborative approach with partners, agencies and brands to understand how do we achieve this overall, and how do we adapt for crises like we're experiencing at the moment.
Is there anything media owners could be doing to just improve the overall situation or experience?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think it is partly about what is the content you're putting on your websites. How are there any controls that you're applying? How are you making that available to advertisers to purchase inventory? That we have a variety of different means through programmatic guaranteed, various marketplace opportunities where we can curate that with our publishers. So I think it's how are media owners or publishers packaging up that information, but also putting the controls on their side. Who is putting content on? How do they manage kind of elements like UGC and certain things in terms of their properties? But also how are they controlling the inventory that's going into the wider ecosystem that is going to be bought? And if there's anything they can remove by definition before that even becomes available.
And Stacey, from your point of view then, what would you like to see more in terms of helping you? How could you get more support on the brand safety front for Bacardi?
Well, we've had this brand safety, viewability, verification, those are topics that were typically set for ad ops and just the digital teams, and none of the brand marketers were really focused on. It wasn't sexy to be honest. And so it wasn't a topic that was really raised in a lot of conversations when we're talking about content and context, when it absolutely should be. And so DV and other partners have really helped us raise the profile around the conversation of brand safety. And now it's conversations that we're having with our CMO, and it's something that is our compliance teams and legal are getting more involved in a positive way. And so it's the conversation has evolved from this is an operational thing you need to do to a larger conversation around, so why don't we advertise in news, and why wouldn't we? And it's just it's forcing some conversations that we really had not been having as a brand, and we took for granted.
Yeah, it was interesting, Tanzil. You mentioned earlier on that you were taking this current moment to educate, I presume, clients. How much education still needs to be done in this respect?
Absolutely. I think we can always be learning. I think that generally we have a varying degree of brands. The spectrum is very, very broad. We have some brands who are very much aware of what their needs are, understand the nuances around brand suitability and across their different campaigns. And we have others who are very much still, we've got a keyword list, we're blocking against sites, what else do we need to do? And that range is it's quite broad. We're doing, from an education perspective, we're engaging with all our clients and beyond, right? We're engaging with the industry, we're working with IAB and ISBA and other trade bodies to make sure that there's a narrative going out to market, which is focused around doing two things, I think. First of all, there's a sort of a slogan that I've been using over the last few months that I'm going to use again today, so forgive me. And it's challenging the status quo. And the reason it's important is, I think people get used to doing the same thing over and over again and think it's good enough. What COVID-19 and this crisis is, if nothing else, has taught us is we should always review what we're doing and understand whether what we're doing is the right way to do it, given the current situation and circumstances. And am I using all the tools and technology available to me today rather than sort of living in the past? And so that's been really the focus of our education has been sort of going back and saying, let's review what you're doing. Let's look at how you're currently protecting yourself and understand whether that's the right way to do it. Is there a better way, a more efficient way, a more effective way, right? Because I think this is the other part of the narrative that we're going to market with is people see brand safety as a protection element. It's something that they do to protect their brand and their businesses. But the data that's provided, understanding of how consumers are engaging with your ads, the level of exposure to those ads, activity on those ads, all of these signals are captured. And so, part of the narrative that we're going to market with right now is the shift from being, about protection and hygiene for all intents and purposes to being one of performance. There's a lot of data there that agencies and brands can use to optimize ahead of the curve, similar to what James said, right? It's if you know that there are certain environments that you shouldn't be advertising in, you shouldn't block them with a CV tool. You should optimize to sort of prevent access to those in the first place through your targeting. And it's about shifting that dynamic and that understanding from being I need to protect to being how do I use this data to drive performance?
James, do you have a viewpoint on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the education piece is an ongoing element that we have to continue to work with our clients. Clients are at different stages of their understanding, and to be honest, overall investment in the digital space, where this obviously is slightly more prevalent topic. So as clients go on that journey, we do have to continue to provide that education. But as Tanzil was mentioning, it's kind of how do we shift that to focus? It's not just about minimizing the risk, but it's also about providing opportunities for you in terms of inventory and using that information to feed back into the strategy. So part of that is how do we provide kind of structured education initiatives for our clients that we can leverage, but also provide that ongoing education through our digital teams, through our account teams, and the other people that interact with our clients, and making sure that across our agency as well, our teams and staff are provided with the most up-to-date and relevant information so they can have meaningful conversations with their advertisers.
Yeah. If there's anything, though, in a time of uncertainty, it's always a good time to innovate and try new things and see what works. Stacy, have you been trying it or testing and learning during recent weeks that you could talk about?
Sorry, was that directed at me?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've been looking at partners that we weren't looking at before. So house parties, Zoom, it's forced us to look at what does experiential mean now. I mean, we have a large partnership with Live Nation where we're part of big festivals. So what does experiential look like in these next few months? So we're looking, everything's different. I can't think of anything that's the same for us right now, except for leaning in more to e-com. But it's almost everything that we thought was true a month ago has kind of gone out the window, and we've had to rethink, replan, and think about our content differently. So when I think about innovation, there's more innovation in the past 3 weeks than I've had in my past year of working, just because we've had to think so differently about how we can be useful during this time, where it makes sense for us to actually be, and when everyone is at home. So I wish I could give you a specific example. We're working through a lot of different scenarios now, but I think the loss of the physical experiential has been the piece that we're focused on. What do we do now that we won't be able to have people actually tasting our drinks. And so what's come out of that actually is a partnership with Deliveroo and some of the biggest, some big bar partners here in the UK, where we're delivering cocktails through Deliveroo. So that's something that maybe would have been, oh, we'll try it, we'll test it. But now it's one of our most important initiatives that we're working on.
Yeah. Tanzil, have you seen any examples of real innovation that you could share?
Absolutely. I think the example that Stacy shared is indicative of a lot of what many brands are trying to do. You know, it's the dynamics of their engagement with their consumers have changed. I mean, everybody's stuck at home. Their engagement with supermarkets has changed. Their engagement with bars and restaurants are closed. So everybody's having to re-engage and change the way that they'd maybe planned their year from January to coming middle of March. It's a completely different dynamic. We've seen some brands change. We look at some of our brands that are using DV. Some of the automotive brands, for example, have had to change their dynamic, and it's moving from being heavily focused on performance metrics to being how do we ensure we maintain a connection with our consumers? How do we ensure that we remain relevant? So you'll have seen very quickly campaigns change. I think James can talk to this probably a little bit as well. But within a matter of 4 or 6 weeks, we've seen entire campaigns move from being about CPA and test drives to being about sentiment and supporting the NHS and supporting different components. And I think it's interesting. I think people are still having those engagement metrics, but their mechanism to do them and the message that they go to market is having to change.
Mm-hmm. James, could you follow on from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think both Stacey and Tanzil mentioned things that we've definitely noticed across our client base. I think we've seen objectives for individual campaigns change and shift to either be less performance focused, to be slightly more engagement focused, and understanding how they pivoted their messaging and whether that is resonating with consumers at the moment. I would say the other interesting part, which is kind of touched on with what Stacey was mentioning, is it's forced some of our clients in verticals that would have very specific ways of engaging with consumers, whether that's in physical locations, primarily through third-party relationships, to think about what their business actually means to the consumer in this landscape. And that's been some really interesting things, whether there's kind of virtual environments that people are curating and crafting to allow people to interact with their product set. How do we change the messaging to show how this does support throughout this crisis? How do we allow people to have or demonstrate that there are products that they can use throughout this time as well? So I think that innovation is also fundamental to how the brands we work with are operating their business. Like, what does this mean now that our consumers are within their home environments, interacting with either digital touch points or physical touch points in different ways? And then how does our communications approach adapt to that as well? I think overall we have seen a shift to digital, as you would likely expect. But those digital properties are not necessarily the ones we would kind of classify as it's not just standard search, and it's not programmatic, it's not display. It's exactly as Stacey mentioned, kind of what are those experiential elements? What are those kind of creative elements that we can put in? How can we kind of embed creativity into it as well, to create a better consumer experience, and then overall land the message that we're trying to get across as well.
I mean, I'm surprised just how positive all three of you have been about the circumstances and all the work that you've had to put in recent weeks. So I guess I'll finish with a question on that. Stacey, starting with yourself, what would be the one positive that you would take out of recent experiences, especially around work towards brand safety and improving that?
Well, I've definitely softened my approach to I don't know if softened is the right word, but I've looked at what brand safety, and I haven't had that blunt tool approach that I may have had 2 months ago around the type of content we would want to be around, and specifically news and as it relates to COVID. So that's something that I've focused on. A positive, something really positive that's come out of this from a work standpoint is just tighter relations with our teams and agency partners. Just seeing people in their home environment, their kids running through, watching what people are dealing with has brought a sense of trust and collaboration that I haven't had in work in a while. So it's been, that piece has been positive, trying to make the most of it. That's my Americanism in me, trying to be positive in this. But yeah.
No bad thing.
Yeah.
James, what would be your positive takeaway?
I would say very similar things to Stacey. I think for overall teams, how they've been able to adapt to working over video conferencing calls, all of those different situations, kids at home, homeschooling, all of those different things that people are having to deal with, and the fact that we've still been able to deliver the work and the work of a standard that we're happy to deliver for our clients as well. I think overall, more broadly, just focused on brand safety, I think it's removed a few barriers within our industry, right? Like, I think it's forcing us to come together because everyone's affected in the same way. You know, this is not certain people have one brand safety issue or they've appeared on certain things or not appeared elsewhere. This is globally affecting us all. So I think it is actually creating conversation and partnership between people who may have not had those conversations before. So overall, I've been really kind of enthused to see how much conversation is actually going on in our industry and how we have been pushing certain different things to go, how do we actually address this? What do we do about it? And allowing kind of a broader set of people to be part of that conversation.
Okay, and last word to you, Tanzil. What would be your positive takeaway in a brand safety setting?
You know, I think there's probably two key positives. First and foremost, I think awareness. COVID-19 has forced people to really think about how they approach brand safety and protecting their brand and engaging with their consumers and the balance between that. You know, those that use, I think somebody used the term blunt tools and blunt mechanisms have found it very difficult to engage with their consumers. You know, the term we use is, you know, you shouldn't use a sledgehammer, you should try to use a scalpel. And I think the challenge that most people have is really focusing those, understanding the technologies available to them. And I think that's the other positive. So, you know, we've seen a need and a request, engagement from brands and agencies to understand what tools are available to them, how they can really get to that scalpel-esque approach, and really focus on trying to determine for their brands, for their clients, what is the right approach. And I mean, as an industry, if we can get away from, I mean, this one keyword is bad for the entire industry, and recognize that, I mean, each brand has its own requirements, even within a client. You know, we look at some of the CPG clients. They have multiple lines of brands targeting from everything from personal hygiene to household hygiene to cars and whatever else, right? So it's important that they recognize the technologies available to them, the opportunities available to them to craft what is the right approach for their brand. And I think if nothing else, this crisis has really brought that home. And we're seeing, I think both of those things are very positive. Yeah.
Well, we will leave on that positive note. But Tanzil, James, Stacey, thank you very much for joining me on this. It's been fascinating to hear your thoughts. I hope you all stay safe and well at home, and thank you to you, the viewer, for joining us as well. There'll be a further Q&A section of this to follow, which you'll find details on the Drum homepage if you have a look at the page hosting this video for more details. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.